once you realize you need to hire somebody, you might not have the financial means to do it, but if you're recognizing that fact, you need to do it. And I didn't recognize that, and I was hesitant to do so. I was fearful that how am I going to pay somebody to join my team when I don't have the new business to get there?
Welcome to another edition of Lifetime Cash Flow through Real Estate Investing. I'm Rod Khleif, and I'm thrilled you're here. Got a really interesting gentleman in here today that came in from Atlanta. His name's Carson Olinger, and Carson has 7 mobile home parks, about a total of about 200 units, and he's got some other property as well, and came down here just to add value. You know, I ask people why they want to get on the show, and usually it's to get investors or so this and that, and he came in here just to add value, which I absolutely admire. Welcome to the show, brother.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate being here.
I appreciate you being here. And so, you know, and you've been at this a good bit. You've been at this for about 7 years now. And so why don't you give us a little background? Because you've got quite a transition. I think you did some wholesaling, you did some other things.
Absolutely.
So why don't you give us a little background on your history in real estate?
Well, thanks, Rod. I'll be happy to. So I got started in 2017. I was working in the corporate environment for quite a long time and felt like my life.
In what capacity?
I was in sales. I worked for a packaging company out of Indiana, so I was more or less autonomous. And I just felt I was on the road. My kids were growing up on Skype back in the day when we had Skype.
Right.
And I just needed to be home. And my wife was home alone quite a bit as I was traveling. And we did a lot of prayer to figure out where we needed to go. And I found another opportunity to work at home, but it was in another packaging business, which I bought into and still own today as kind of an ancillary side gig. But I really wanted to get into real estate. And when that packaging business started to go south, I recognized very quickly that this wasn't going to sustain our lifestyle. So my wife turned to me and said, you know, I've been praying a lot about you getting into real estate and you need to do it. And she gave me a lot of confidence to do that. And quite honestly, Rod, I was scared. I was scared to get into it. I tried to do it with a partner back in 2008, and that was the worst time to try and do it, and I'm glad we didn't. But I knew I had to have a plan, so I made some goals. I said, if I'm going to do this, I'm not jumping in feet first. I'm going in head first. And we're going to have a 1-year plan, a 3-year plan, and a 5-year plan. And I knew that this is a people business just like any other business. And that's what I did with sales. So I said, I need to meet people. So I went to every single RIA that I could find in 30, 40, 50 miles in every direction.
By the way, guys, if you don't know what a RIA is, it's basically the predecessor to meetup groups, okay? And so Real Estate Investor Association meetings is what that stood for, and that's where everybody started back in the day. Please continue.
So I went to all these RIAs, and I was just meeting people, and I was getting involved, and I was asking all the silly questions because I didn't know the language. I didn't know real estate. I was like, hey, what's 2 + 2? People would answer me, and they would be willing to do so. And I found that fascinating that all these people that were involved with it that had these great stories, had properties, been doing it for years. They'd probably forgotten more than I knew. And they were answering my questions. And I recognized immediately there was a great network of people out there. So I cultivated that. I tried to find investors I could put on lists. And then I also tried to go out and find properties. But one of the things I recognized early on, Rod, was you had to have credibility. You had not only in your integrity, but in your numbers. You needed to know what you were going to do. And I didn't know some of these things. So I reached out to some people I knew and I said, hey, I'm going to go look at this house. Will you walk it with me? Tell me what this house needs in a rehab value. And then I'm going to tell you what I think it needs. And then we'll figure out where I'm wrong. And as a result, I'll give you some money on the back end after I wholesale it. So I was getting an education without really having to pay for it, but I was sharing the profits. And I recognized that's the way to do it because I didn't have a lot of money.
So that worked?
It worked very well. Yeah. I mean, the first house I remember specifically, I came out $7,500 is what I thought. And he was like, no, it's more like $35,000.
Oh, holy crap.
Yeah, it was way off. And I said, what am I missing? And he went through it all and I picked it up. So I understood concepts very well. Matter of fact, that first deal was a subject to acquisition.
No kidding.
Yeah. And I love
Okay, so let's stop there for a second. All right. So you've said a lot very quickly. One of the things you said was you did goals, okay? 1, 3, and 5 year goals, which is one of the first things we do I mean, it is the first thing you do at one of my boot camps. Okay.
Right.
And I mean, literally, how do you get anything if you know what it is? You gotta know what the hell you want and why you want it. So you did it you just knew you had to do it, and you did a 1, 3, and a 5-year plan. That's part of my goal setting workshop as well. I tell people, put a number, how long it's going to take you to achieve those goals, and we work through that process. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. So guys, those of you listening, if you haven't done your goals, go to rodslinks.com and go to the bottom. I've got my goal setting workshop there. I'm not going to try to sell you anything. Go do it. Have your spouse do it. Have your kids, if they're over 10 years old, do it. Set them up right to get going. But you got to get your goals done. All right, now let's talk about subject to for a minute. Because I've done some subject to deals. And you have to be very careful with subject to deals. So go ahead and talk about what that is.
So you're right, Rod. You have to be very careful because you not only have to protect your interest, but you also have to protect the seller.
Right.
And if you have any type of integrity whatsoever, you need to make sure that everybody is protected.
Well, or you can go to jail. I
Absolutely.
mean, there's some federal laws now around subject to. You got to be very careful. They put people in jail back in 2009 and 10, what they called equity skimming. So describe what subject to is rather than have me tell them.
So basically, you're taking over a mortgage that somebody else has.
Right.
And typically those mortgages are somewhat upside down, so you may have to catch them up. So we would work with them to get those numbers to where we knew what the catch up was.
They were behind on their payments, so you'd have to catch up their payments, and then you'd basically step in and take over their payments.
Correct.
The difference between that and assuming a loan through an assumption is the lender really doesn't know that it's happened, and very often you'll use some mechanisms to kind of keep that on the DL. Like a lot of people use land trusts and things like that. You do that. Okay, so you'll throw it in a land trust, maybe in the name of the seller or and the address of the property, and then you can transfer that beneficial of the interest in the land trust and mitigate the potential for what lenders call a due on sale clause.
Correct.
And you still have to be careful, but I don't think I've ever seen a lender do a due on sale for a transfer like that. Not to say they couldn't,
right?
But where people got in trouble, and I want to bring this up if you don't mind, because my job's to protect you as much as it is to help you grow, is if you do one of these subject twos and you don't make the payments and you collect the rents, it's called equity skimming, and it's a federal crime now.
Right.
So just you don't screw around with that, is my point.
And that goes back to ethics, right?
Yeah, well, it does.
Yeah.
Bottom line, our number one core value is integrity in all my companies, but I just want to bring that up. So you talked about credibility. Circle back to, well, actually you talked about language as well. See, that's another thing. You got to learn the nomenclature. Right. Like, if you come to one of my boot camps, at the back of the manual that you get is it's a glossary of all the terms you got to memorize. And you've got to know what a pref is. You need to know what an LOI is. You need to know what a PSA is. By the way, the pref is the preferred return on an investment. The LOI is a letter of intent, which starts the conversation with the seller, and the PSA is the purchase and sale agreement. But you got to know all that stuff.
Absolutely.
Right? So you got to learn the language. And you learn that by being around people that do it, right? By going to these RIA meetings and talking with them, and you learn the nomenclature. Talk about credibility.
So credibility is twofold. One, it's obviously your handshake. You got to be a credible person. You got to know what you're talking about.
Right.
The other thing is you have to know the numbers. And I got into wholesaling. My first goal was to get into the business and wholesale. But as you know, wholesaling is an easy barrier to entry. There's nothing really there that you got to put into it other than some time. But I knew that if I wanted to have credibility for my 2 and 3 and 5 year plan, that I had to come out of the gate where the people that I'm going to sell these properties wholesale, they're going to want to come back to me later to do a fix and flip or maybe borrow money from. So if I'm going to bring an investor out that probably knows more than I do at that time, they got to know that the numbers I'm giving them are accurate. The ARV, the rehab, so we're not wasting their time.
By the way, ARV is the after repaired value, which is a common term in this space. We're kind of talking in the single family space right now, but we're talking about his history. But I think it'll add value to you to go ahead and continue this conversation. But yeah, that's one of the things you got to calculate when you do a flip or a wholesale is what's it going to be worth after you fix it up. So that's the ARV. Okay.
So that was the credibility aspect of it. I knew that if I can establish credibility by having the numbers right, that I would gain credibility in the marketplace.
So that's how you got the credibility, was by offering people a piece of the deal to come help you walk through it, hands-on. Got it. Okay, perfect. Okay, keep going.
So with that being said, I then evolved through the wholesaling process into fix and flip. My first fix and flip was a wholesale property I couldn't move. And I had an investor come in and say, hey, I'll buy it for your contract price, but I'll pay for the entire renovation. You run it. Education, right? And I'm thinking, great, I'm not going to lose the contract. I'm not going to make any money on the front end, but there's opportunity to learn an opportunity to make money on the back end.
Oh, so he's going to share a little in the back end.
He shared 50% of the deal
so
with
50-50.
me. Yeah.
That's a hell of a guy.
It was great. And he saw that I had some potential, I guess.
Okay.
And we did other things together down the road. But it gave me an opportunity. And a lot of people said, well, I'm not going to take that. I'm not going to make any money. But I saw the potential there to gain
Did you make
knowledge.
any money?
We did. We actually wound up making about $10,000 each.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And I thought so. It was better than not
you
losing the country.
you learned rehab. I'm sure you stubbed your toe a few times.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to talk about that later, but
many times.
we're talking about some failures. I know you've got a YouTube channel that focuses on failures, right?
Well, I have a Facebook channel that does that. Yeah, my YouTube stuff, I would do a lot of educational stuff back when I was doing a lot of the fix and flips. So I would show people what not to do and how to do it and what to look out for when you're doing certain things. Yeah.
Right. Well, you talked about RIAs, and I know that you formed your own RIA that you kind of let go, but you're thinking about reinstituting it. What was it called again?
It's called North Point
North
RIA.
Point.
It's in the north side of Atlanta.
Gotcha.
But it's an educational RIA. It was totally free. And we just wanted to help educate people and also grow our network. So we'd bring value to people coming in there, from tax advice to social networking, what have you, and then concepts of, subject to acquisitions, whether, deal structure, how to analyze deals, those types of things.
Sure. That sounds really good. Okay, so you started fix and flipping. You did that first one. Continue from there, please.
So we fixed and flipped, I don't know, teens, 20s, something in that range. We got into doing that. And I recognized, hey, when I'm following my path, my goals, this is a job. I don't want a job. I want a business.
Yes, flipping and wholesaling is a job.
It was.
Every January 1st, you go back to work.
You got it.
Which is why we're here, because the name of my podcast is Lifetime Cash Flow for a reason. And that means you create annuities, basically. You're buying assets that throw off cash flow for life.
Yep.
So you got the memo.
I did. Well,
Okay.
I got it early on, and that was part of my goals. I wanted to wholesale to get into the business, fix and flip to make significant money, and then save the money, and then get into long-term buy and hold, which is what we started doing. I bought my first duplex in 2019, and it was a wreck, but I renovated it. I got it for like $70,000.
Nice.
And we put 30 in it.
In Atlanta somewhere?
It's in a northern suburb. It's not a submarket of Atlanta,
Okay.
in a little town called Cleveland. But it's just outside the mountains. Great little area, but long-term tenants, and I've had some tenants in there for the whole time.
Wow.
But it's now probably worth $320,000.
Nice.
And so it's doing well. I'm holding on to that asset. And then I bought a single-family home and rented it as well, and did well. I've since got rid of that asset. But then I found a mobile home park. And so one thing I did was I did things that other people didn't. I recognized that people are buying lists to find properties. People are looking through the tax records, and they're doing all these things that's easily accessible, the low-hanging fruit. And I found myself calling the same people these other people were calling. And I said, I need to do something different. So we focused on dispossessories. I went and looked at evictions. I physically went down to the courthouse, pulled evictions, and
called those owners.
Called those owners.
I teach this crap at my boot camp, and I finally met someone that actually does it. I love it. I mean, this is one of the strategies I talk about for finding deals. And I pre-frame this by saying, if you're willing to do what other people won't, you will always be a success.
Yes.
Like for me, knocking on doors of people in foreclosure, 30 years ago or 40 years ago, and bought hundreds of houses that way. And so you just went to the evict, because listen, when a seller is evicting or an owner is evicting someone, they're not a happy person.
Nope.
Did you ever go to eviction court and watch the glee on a judge's face when he realized they did the paperwork wrong and he starts them all over again?
I never did that.
Oh,
I've been a part of it.
If you're masochistic, or I don't know if sadistic, I don't know which it is, but if you want to see, the judges love it when somebody screws up the paperwork and an owner, and they have to start all over again. You want to talk about a pissed off owner.
That's
yeah, you're catching them when they're motivated. Motivation is everything.
And
I'll get people to call me and say, I can't get this seller motivated. I'm like, you're not going to motivate somebody. It has to be there. Divorce, death, evictions, tired, sick, whatever. Yeah.
And that's what we focused on, was motivation.
Yeah.
And I recognized early on, I said, if I go spend the time and look for these dispossessories, they're going to change every week, every month. I'm getting new leads, but I get something out of the call. I have their phone number, so I'm not doing letter campaigns. I'm calling these people directly. And they're usually, typically, as well as I do, most of these owners are probably some of the inherited property, onesie, twosie kind of stuff. But a lot of them may have more properties. So I either got to deal with the property.
How many properties do you think you got that way?
Well, my first mobile home park, I got that way. I called on a single dispossessory, and I said, would you be willing to sell that unit? And he goes, no, but I'll sell you the mobile home park. And I was like,
that was the 7 unit you talked
about?
The
27 unit.
27 unit.
That was my first actual mobile home park.
No
it was
kidding.
27 units.
Good for you.
And then we structured that whole thing with bank and owner financing and some money down. So
you did some creative stuff.
Very much so. And that's really what we do now. It's a lot of deal architecture.
You got some bank financing on it?
I did.
Wow.
I did. It was a really...
That can be tough on smaller mobile home parks. But
it was. And we only got a 50% loan to value from the bank.
Then 50% they'll typically feel comfortable
right,
with.
They did.
Okay.
But the nice thing was I didn't have any experience, but the man who sold it to me wanted to stay on as the on-site manager.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
So he lived there.
He lived there. I gave him his rent for free. He did all the maintenance for free other than just paying for the actual materials.
That's interesting.
And it's still to this day.
He's there to this day.
To this day, yeah.
Oh, that's crazy.
Bought it in 2019.
No kidding.
Yep.
That's crazy. Well, I kind of want to talk about mobile home parks a little bit, but
Sure.
if you still have more to your story, we could circle back to that.
Well, that's really the evolution.
That's
it
it.
was
Okay.
the
That's
wholesaling to flipping to into multifamily.
But now I know you want to go larger now.
We are going larger.
And I'm
so
like,
we just bought a better asset. We did a
90
1031 exchange from a mobile home park into an apartment complex.
How many units?
14.
Oh, 14. Okay,
Yeah.
just a small apartment complex.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he told me he wanted to go larger. I'm like, dude, if you're in the right spot for that.
We're trying. Yeah, we're trying to go.
He told
from
me he's
six
been
figures
suffering through my podcast. Started at number 1 and done a whole bunch of podcasts. Like, man, that sounds painful to me. But anyway, so mobile home parks. Now, I know a lot about the business. My brother owns several large parks. One of my best friends is Kevin Bupp. I don't know if you know that name, but he's got thousands and thousands of pads. And you said that you have all park-owned homes.
The majority,
the majority. See, the strategy for most operators is they'll buy a park and they'll sell the park-owned homes to the residents, so they're just renting land.
Yep.
And that's the most popular strategy, because if you own the home, those things aren't made that well, and they break down, and you're talking about the toughest demographic probably that rents right now. And so they're not easy on them either. And they have no pride of ownership if they don't own as well. So you have that component. So tell me how you get around all of those issues.
Well, we actually try and buy value adds. We're looking at, it needs to cash flow day one.
Okay.
We're not buying on equity long term, but that does happen.
Right.
We want to make sure we're getting these things at the right price. So a lot of these, as you well know, Rod, are not managed properly. So they're just back of the napkin kind of stuff. So we're buying them typically in the teens cap rates. So we're getting value there, I think. And then obviously they come with inherent problems. So what we try and do is stabilize the property. And then once we get it stabilized, we then go to the tenants, assuming we don't have a lot that are in.
So you convert them.
We try to.
Then you try to sell them the homes. Good. Yeah. See, you're doing the model then.
Right.
You just doing a little slower maybe than some of these larger operators that pop in and immediately put everything up for sale. Okay, got it. Okay. Yeah, because that is the most successful, I think, and profitable model is to convert them, and basically you can sell them the home and they make payments on the home, and they could be paying the same amount of money to you monthly as if you owned it.
Right.
Maybe, but they might even be paying a little more when you sell it to them, and you're basically loaning them the money to buy that home. So they're paying you lot rent plus the home price paid out, amortized.
Sure.
And so it could be about the same amount of money, but then they have pride of ownership. Like they
take care of the property.
They take care of it better. Yeah, of course they do. Yeah.
And then what's interesting about that on the backside, Rod, is a lot of them, when they have to move, we have a right of first refusal to buy it back.
Right.
So then we can get the property back and then do it again.
Get the home back.
Exactly.
The home back in the mobile home park. So so you were completely self-taught in this. You didn't do any courses or anything like this. This is all, so you just went to RIAs and talked to people. It's a great way to learn. I tell my warriors, my coaching students, getting connected with other warriors and building relationships is more important than learning the business and suffering through my course that they get access to. It's more important that they make connections. And they're like, are you serious? Yeah. I'm like, yeah, that's more important than learning right now is those connections. So you just did it organically. So, talk about some of the seminars. I call them seminars.
Sure.
Talk about some of the seminars or failures or setbacks, or you got your butt kicked on some of these deals, because everybody's got them.
We do. We've got them. Some of them weren't as painful as I've heard, but they had their own pain levels. My first one I mentioned to you a little while ago, the one where the wholesale deal turned into a flip. So we were trying to move through it. We did not do a termite inspection. And the crawl space was accessible on one side of the house, but as you went to the other side, it got too narrow, and neither one of us wanted to crawl up in there.
Right.
Turns out there was termite damage that compromised the substructure of the home and a lot of the floorboards and stuff. And so we wound up having about another $10,000 that we didn't expect to spend that we had to deal with because the termite inspection, which we did not do on the front end, came up negative.
Okay, there's seminar number one.
Right.
Do a termite inspection.
So we've always just we've done all of our own due diligence.
Oh, you do your own termite inspection. Okay,
Yep.
that's fantastic. Now let me say something else, guys, because in our world, you will do seller finance deals. And now lender will always require a termite, but they'll also always require a phase 1 environmental report. I'm going to tell you, even if you're doing a seller finance deal and they're not requiring either of those things, you should always do them, because especially the phase 1, if you buy a property that at one time could have been 50 years ago was a gas station or a dry cleaner or whatever, I don't care if you just bought that property yesterday and they find something that's dangerous, EPA finds something, you're paying for it. Doesn't matter if you just bought the property. So yeah, you always should do those two things. Now you can inspect yourself for termites. Sure, that's not rocket science. I tell the story, fixing it can be rocket science, because I tell the story. I have a guest house here, and I have this beautiful tree behind the guest house. And I saw termites coming out of the door in the guest house when I was sitting on that patio. So I'm like, okay, I can fix this. So we dug a trench all the way around this thing, and I poured the termite solution. I killed this beautiful tree. Yeah. So anyway, I digress. But anyway, so that was the first one. Talk about another one, because I know you've got that Facebook group with seminars and failures on there.
Right. So another one was so I had the termite issue, but we had a property we just got out of about a year and a half ago. And we had a lot of issues with our contractors during COVID, and it delayed us. And one of the problems you run into is understanding when you need to order material. So doors and windows take longer, I guess, than most other products.
Yeah, right.
And we didn't see that. And we ordered our doors too late. And what happened is it held up our flooring and everything else that needed to go in, because all of our door jambs needed to go in. Oh, wow. And it was a real headache, and it pushed us back 2 months. And what happened as a result of that is the market shifted. We were hoping to get on the market like in June. We didn't get on the market till August. And when that happened, the interest rates were up, the craze in the industry was down, and we lost probably $200,000 to $300,000 worth of potential equity. We still made money on the house, right? But it was not smart on our part. We should have thought that through a little bit better.
Just the sequence of the construction. Yeah. I mean, guys, if you're going to do a rehab like that, by God, you better have a GC helping you, or somebody that's done it before that knows these things, because if and you'll see some of these guys that'll come in, a remodel will come in, and they won't do the sequence right. Like they'll paint after the floors are in, or they'll paint after the new light fixtures are in, and they get paint all over everything, and that's very common. So it's got to be sequenced properly, and yes, certainly material purchasing is another big thing. So as you're going through this evolution that you went through in the business, talk about some epiphanies that you had. Talk about some aha moments. You're like, okay, all right, now I know what I need to do. Go ahead.
So we were just talking before the show that once you realize you need to hire somebody, you might not have the financial means to do it, but if you're recognizing that fact, you need to do it. And I didn't recognize that, and I was hesitant to do so. I was fearful that, how am I going to pay somebody to join my team when I don't have the new business to get there? But I need the new person on my team
to get the new business.
Right?
It's the
cart and the horse.
Yeah, right.
Exactly. So I now am not fearful. I don't let fear hold me back in anything.
Let's talk about fear for a minute, because you told me you were fearful before.
I was scared
when you first got into this business. You had that W-2 job. Bills were being paid, but not great. But I mean, you didn't love. You were traveling a lot. How'd you push through the fear?
My wife, a lot of prayer. My wife gave me a lot of support, which to this day, she still does. And I think, and now she's been listening to your podcast as well. God, so she's given me a lot of positive feedback. And you see it through different eyes. It's great. But she's been very supportive. So I pushed through, because, you always talk about you
What's her name?
Her name is Elizabeth.
Elizabeth, thank you for pushing him. Okay, great job. All right.
But, you know, through a lot of prayer as well, we really were trying to think where we need to be, because our family is my why. We talk about that a lot. You know, why are we doing this? And I love real estate. I just loved it. I've always loved it, and I wanted to do it. And so once I got that first deal, I said, you know what, I can do this. It's just a matter of adding a zero at the end, or
you just
scaling
realized it by doing it.
Yeah.
And you you know, it really, we call it a courage muscle. You know, everybody that sat in that couch started with a house or a duplex. I mean, very few exceptions. I can maybe think of one or two that went right to a 100-unit complex. It's very unusual. We have that courage muscle, and you know, and I see it with my students as well when they're going after a large deal. The law of the first deal. It's the scariest. It takes the longest. It's the most stressful. And then they get one. Next thing I know, they have 3 or 4. I'm like, what the hell just happened? Because it's all psychological.
Right.
But so what do you think, you know, and so you're in acquisition mode now. You want to start doing some larger deals. You just took down a 14 unit, maybe want to go bigger. What do you think is the most challenging part of your of what you're doing right now? What do you think is the most challenging and maybe the least fun? And then I want you to tell me what you enjoy the most as well. But let's start with the challenging first.
So the challenging thing right now is deal acquisition that I'm doing, which I'm responsible for, coupled with operations. We self-manage, and we're able to do that effectively and save some money. But I'm finding myself spending a lot more time on operations because we're building our team up, getting more proficient. So we've been focusing this year on operational efficiencies, which we're getting better at. And so knowing now that we want to scale up to larger properties, we need to be more effective so we don't make larger mistakes, especially as we're changing from mobile homes into apartments, into better asset classes. There's less margin for error because your cap rates are a little bit lower, and you've got a lot more moving parts typically because you've got singular roof structures under multiple tenants or over multiple tenants. So I find it challenging right now to distance myself from the operations, but at the same time improve the operations. But then the analytics of these deals are a little bit more in depth, from all the due diligence to the numbers. Do we have good IRRs?
Do you have an analytical person on your team?
That's me.
Oh, that's you.
Well, and my other partner. I got two partners, and we're both pretty good. Yeah.
I mean, you're the mouthpiece. I can see that right now.
Right.
You're a great communicator like me, but I've partnered with a CPA and super analytical people on my team to get through it, because that's not me. I can read a spreadsheet. I don't like it at all. You know, them you can throw in a room with a spreadsheet, throw raw meat in once in a while. They're happy. You know, but
we've got a partner on our team that he's really good at.
Okay, good, because you got to have that. Yes. I mean, this business is primarily empirical. It's primarily numbers. You get the numbers right. You ask all the right questions. Pretty hard to make a major mistake. But okay, so that's your least favorite part is handling the operations while you're handling acquisitions. By the way, back to something you said, you were afraid to hire somebody. What was your first hire? I'm just curious.
So we hired basically an assistant to run our operations.
That's what I knew you were going to say. Guys, I get this question all the time from my students. I get it from people that listen to the podcast. You know, what should be my first hire? It's always an executive or virtual assistant. Somebody to help you with. I mean, listen, I love to ride my lawnmower around on my lawn and do stuff with my hands, but it's not the best use of my time.
Right.
Yeah, swinging a hammer is not the best use of my time. And so, you know, you've got to look at the things that you do, and if you can leverage those things to an assistant or a virtual assistant or an executive assistant or personal assistant or whatever, that is usually always the best first hire.
And she was also my real estate agent.
Well, perfect. There you go. Boom. Okay. So you know, I have a lot of listeners that want to do this, and I'm so grateful for you coming all the way down here to do this, brother. I really appreciate the where your heart's at and the why for you to come here, because it's very unusual. Usually people want something, and so, you know, speak to those listeners that, like you, are just getting started, haven't done a lot yet, maybe have done a house or two. Give them some words of encouragement, and/or, you know, what would you say to them?
Have a purpose. What are you doing it for? I love deal architecture. I enjoy it.
Yeah.
I find this to be fun, and I don't find myself working until I get into the operations. And that's a little bit of work, right? It can be stressful. But the deal architecture, analyzing deals, putting together contracts, structuring creative acquisition strategies, I love that. And what that's done for my family is created a mentality. And
are your kids working it?
My son, older son, sees the value in having passive income.
How old is he?
He just turned 18.
Okay.
And my younger son really loves the business, and he's the other sales guy. He's going to probably get into it as well. So they've got the fever. It's just a matter of cultivating that the right way. But we have a thing in our family we call the REI life, the real estate investing life. And that's the name of my boat. I put REI life on my boat. It's on my wave runners. It's my my network at my home.
Love it.
So it's a mentality. It's, hey, we have the autonomy now to do the things we want to do as a family. We can travel. We can spend time together. We can do the things we want on our schedule for the most part. And it's just going to get better and better as we scale up. But at the same time, we're helping other people, whether it be my tenants in the homes, providing them a good place to live, or whether it's other investors that we're able to give knowledge to. Because you mentioned a little while ago, I did it on my own. To some degree, yes. But I had a lot of people that influenced me. They gave me the right direction and the right words of wisdom at the right time to help get there. And I learned from them. And I say this all the time. I learn from people that have forgotten more than I know because I surround myself with people like that.
That's it. If you want to play tennis, do you want to play someone better than you or worse than you? I mean, hello.
Right.
I formed a mastermind. It's really the largest in the world of multifamily investors, probably about 45 billion in assets in there. I kind of slowed down on it because it's just consuming, but I want to be around people that think what I think is hard is easy, right?
Yeah.
So I did it for the same thing you did. And, sometimes I had to pinch myself that I'm leading groups that have, 5, 10, 20,000 apartment units. And at the time I didn't have that. And so, I had a lot of imposter syndrome, frankly, but that's how you learn, trial by fire. When I stand in front of a stage in front of 1,000 people, I learn every single time I'm teaching this. And so, but you got to get around it. You got to immerse yourself in it, which is why the RIA group or meetup groups or whatever are so important, guys. You got to get around people that want to do this. Because if nothing else, because of, there's so many people will default to a peer group they go to school with or they work with. And those people may not have your best interests at heart. They may love you, but they may hold you back out of their own fears or limiting beliefs or fear of failure or whatever. And sometimes it's family, right? And I tell you, love your family, but choose your freaking peers, right? So get around people that want more. It's the reason my warriors, my coaching students kick ass. I mean, there are over 200,000 units. It just blows my mind. Every day almost in our Facebook group, somebody's closing on something. It's crazy. And all those deals are done between warriors or for the most part done between warriors. And so but you got to get around people that want more, people that will encourage you and validate you and push you and praise you rather than the ones that'll be scared and say, I remember my dad saying, go get a real job. He worked at Continental Airlines for 36 years and he got laid off. Right. So what's the real job, right?
Sure.
And so, my mom was always afraid of it too, but she pushed me. But yeah. So let me ask you this. As you've built these alliances with people, because you've partnered on some of these deals, obviously. That's part of this business is you partner. And by the way, guys, if you're going to think about doing this and get into a partnership, go to rodslinks.com and download my book about the questions you ask before you get into a partnership. Have you had any partnerships fail?
I have, yes.
Yeah, see, we all have.
It's the hardest ship to steer.
Yeah, and it's partnerships like a marriage, easy to get into and hard to get out of. And I tell my warriors this too, my students, is like, be careful. Do your homework on someone. Don't get caught up in the emotion of it. Only do one deal to start. See, if everybody does have a work ethic and they have integrity and they do what they say they're going to do. But would you agree with all this?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I've had people wanted to give me a lot of money.
Right.
And I said, let's hold off. Let's walk before we run.
Right.
Make sure that we can do business together because it could go sideways either way.
Yeah. And it's really important. And it's important to trust your gut. If your gut doesn't feel right, trust it. Would you agree with that?
Totally.
Yeah. Every time I've ignored it, I've had my butt handed to me, and so.
And my wife's a good.
Women are better at this. They have
she
better
tells
intuition.
Me a lot of times, you need to think about that. I'm not getting a good feeling from that.
Yeah, and they can feel it. Your brain is so powerful; it can pick up on these micro nuances that you're not consciously aware of, and if just trust it because your brain can see it. If somebody's not congruent, for example. So as you're building your team now, what does your team consist of now? You've got some partners, you've got some admins, if you're doing property management, you probably have a couple people. Yeah,
I do. Yes. Yeah. So we have 2 partners that we're all in this together for the most part on the properties we share. I have some properties I own by myself, But then we have 2 ladies that run all of our operations through different software programs. We're using Rent Manager, but we're shifting over to Door Loop right now. And
the property management software.
Right. And then we've got a VA out of India that's helping us with one of our latest acquisitions, doing a lot of the calling and the follow-ups on the, because we get everything through the apps now. So that works really well. And then we've got a team of guys that can go from our properties, because they're not necessarily concentrated, but they're in a decent enough area. They're only 30-minute drive, 40-minute drive one way or the other. So we got a couple of guys that work for us.
Maintenance guys.
Pretty much, yeah. But then some of the larger properties, like the one I mentioned to you earlier, we've got a guy on site that handles that. And then we inherited some people, quite honestly, from some of the acquisitions. We kept them on and just, whittled it down a little bit to make sure they were more in line with what we wanted to do.
Yeah, keeping that seller, what a brilliant idea that was. He gets to stay and you own the place. That's freaking awesome.
And being my first foray into that business, I didn't quite know what I was doing.
Yeah, so perfect.
And I learned a lot from him.
Yeah, that's fantastic. What a home run. So a win-win, really. And anytime you can do a win-win, it's a home run. So, knowing what you know now, if you went back in time to 2017 when you started, is there anything you might do differently?
I think so.
Tell me about it.
I would probably start off in the multifamily space.
Yeah.
Duplex, just go right into buy and hold.
Yeah.
I think the only reason I did the other stuff was just to get name and credibility. And I guess out of my fear, knowing that there's just a zero barrier to entry there, I didn't have anything to risk. And I knew I could do it with other people's money, which we have, but I didn't know what risk that posed to me. And what I found was there is risk, but it's not as what we all think it is.
Yeah.
And I would have gotten started in the cash flow game a lot sooner than I did now.
Let me talk about credibility for a second, because you brought it up a couple of times. I'm going to tell you, this is why, again, a program like my Warrior Group, and I'm not selling it right now because you can go do this on your own, but it's so powerful because there are people in that group, and there are people out, if you go to RIA meetings, you'll find people that own 200 doors, 300 doors, 400 doors. And that's the value of getting around people like that, because if you can bring them a deal, or bring them money for a deal, you're in.
Yeah.
And you take down your first deal. Yeah, you won't have the whole thing. Big deal. First of all, I would take 10, 20, 30, 40, 50% of something over 100% of nothing any day, number one. But number two, once you've taken down a deal or two, even if you only have 10% of it, 20% of it, then it's on your resume. Sure. And you have instant credibility. But the other thing is, if you align with someone that's got a few hundred doors, which is how my Warriors do it, they go to somebody and say, yeah, and they align with them and they agree to work together. They say, yeah, well, we own 500 doors. Use the we word. And, you don't own them. It's the partner you're working with, but you use the we word, and you've got instant credibility with sellers, with brokers, with investors. That's how everybody does this. They start with a sponsor that's got some units, and they align and join or start a team, but typically they'll join a team to do their first deal or two.
Sure.
And they've got that instant credibility.
You mentioned earlier that you get 1 or 2 people that give you some money.
Yeah.
I heard that early on. Hey, all you need is 1 or 2 investors. Yeah. And you're thinking to yourself, well, they're going to run out of money. Well, the fact is, they may run out of money, but if they made money, they're going to tell 4 of their friends. And we have 2 or 3 investors.
Really?
And we're cranking deals. Yeah. We've got $15 million in assets.
Yeah.
And it comes just from the leverage that we're doing with banks, but we also have great relationships with our lending partners too.
Yeah, sure, of course.
And then we've got all the creative stuff that we're doing on top of the cash. Right. So it's a machine that can just be scaled up. And all you're doing is adding a zero at the end.
That's it.
You just move it from 7 figures to 8 figures and just keep going.
Yeah,
it's just a number.
It's a little scary on your first one. I will just tell you right now, when you raise money for your first syndication, you'll probably call me and freak out, and people do, but you get through it, and it's okay. So let's talk about networking for a minute, okay? We talked about the fact that you went to all these RIAs, and then you even did your own for a while, even though it wasn't big. You had like 15, 20 people at a time. What was the benefit of that?
It was learning the language, because at first I was going to these RIAs and I was, like I said earlier,
didn't know what
just asking questions, and people were opening up and telling me.
What was the advantage on the networking component?
Oh, from the networking side, everybody I met, I'd get a business card.
Right.
Now it's all digital, but I would literally get the business card. I'd go back home the next day, I'd put them in a spreadsheet where I met them, so I could always refer back years later and know where they were. And I got their email addresses and I put them on mailers. So at the time when I was wholesaling, I now had investors that would look to buy these deals.
Okay.
Over time, I met my attorney through a RIA. I met my accountant through a RIA. All these people that were interested in real estate, insurance guys, all these different people that feed into the collective system of real estate in one shape or another. My contractor I met through another person at a RIA, through a referral. And it kept building and building and building. And the value there was, you can't measure it. It's
so
just,
now you've got a couple thousand people.
yeah,
Probably,
I got a couple thousand people. If I need to wholesale a deal tomorrow, because, one thing I wanted to do is create multiple streams of income. And just like the stock market, it goes up and down and different things. Right now might not be the best time to be wholesaling and flipping, but cash flow has gotten us through the difficult times.
Yeah.
And it's a huge value. If you've got that going for you and the ability to do some single family stuff on the side, you've got a lot of arrows in your quiver.
Yeah, no question. I mean, this business is a networking business, and that's why, that's why you need to get around people that are doing it, and you'll learn that way. You'll it really is relation. It's really who you know more than what you know.
It is.
And yeah. So what actions would you advise one of my listeners to take right now if they're thinking about doing this?
It's a great question. Find someone that knows more than you and tell them how you can bring value to their system.
Good. Yeah, that's good.
Because in the long run, you'll learn. They'll move something off of their plate onto you that you can do. You've got assets, you've got talents that they may not have, but you also have a lot of weaknesses. And maybe their strengths will build up your weaknesses. And collectively, we're all a team in this thing. It's a people business. So go to people that you know are doing it and say, what can I do to help your business grow? Nice. I have a deal. Maybe you'd like to fund it. I have a deal. Maybe you'd like to flip it. How can I manage the property for you? Can I learn the operations? What can you do to help them out? And if you can do that, you'll learn, and then you'll bring value to somebody's equation. Nice. And you'll be brought into other deals. Nice. But don't be afraid, like you said earlier, don't be afraid to give up a part of the deal, even if it's yours. You're bringing that to the table. There's value there. Absolutely. No, that's how you start. That's how you get going. That's how everybody starts. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you coming down here, brother. It's great to meet you. You've got a big heart, and you've added some tremendous value today. Thank you. Well, thank you very much. Yep. So one other quick thing. We encounter so many people that are frankly frustrated. They're looking in the mirror and they're frustrated that they haven't been able to escape the rat race. They haven't been able to build cash flow to the point where they're able to have financial and time freedom with their families. And maybe they see other people buying real estate and creating, incredible cash flow, and they think, well, it's just scary. Buying apartments is intimidating. And I get it. See, that's why we created our Warrior Mentorship Program. They're our coaching students, and they've had extraordinary results. My students, I've been teaching about 5 years, and they own upwards of 140,000 units now that we know of, right? And we feel like it's just getting going. Now, we're looking to grow this group and really take it to the next level. And honestly believe that the greatest transfer of wealth could be upon us right now with this current economic environment. Everything's going on sale. So we're looking for people who want to follow a proven framework, really like a blueprint or a map, literally step by step. And then they're able to leverage our systems and our incredible network to raise money and equity, to find deals and close those deals and build partnerships, really nationwide. So if you're interested in finding out more about how you can become more in our incredible network and take advantage of the unbelievable opportunities that are upon us, you can apply to my Warrior Mentorship Program by texting the word CRUSH to 72345, or you can go to mentorwithrod.com. And what we'll do is we'll set up a call so you can check us out and we can check you out and see if it's a fit. Now, again, you can go to mentorwithrod.com or text the word CRUSH to 72345 to apply, and we will speak soon.